Përpara rrugëve, përpara qytetit, përpara fushave, kjo tokë I përkiste ujit. Pastaj ujit ju dha një formë e re. U bë tokë. Dhe toka u bë prodhim. Pastaj erdhën njerëzit. Sollën hartat e tyre. Arat bujqësore u zhdukën, por gjeometria e tyre mbeti. Sot, ky territor qëndron mes kujdesës dhe mundësisë. Nuk është më fshat. Nuk është ende qytet. Është në pritje. Çfarë prodhon një universitet? Dije, kërkim, inovacion, mundësi, kulturë, një qytet. Kjo tokë ka qenë shumë gjëra. Ujë, fusha, tenpanim. Sot përgatitet për një tjetër transformim. Pyetja më sfiduese nuk është më se si do të duket universiteti. Pyetja është çfarë qyteti do të rritet rreth tij.
Zonja dhe zotrinj.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'd now like to invite the rector of the Aleksandër Moisiu University, Mr. Shkëlqim Fortuzi, for his opening remarks. Your Excellency, Prime Minister of the Republic of Albania, Mr. Edi Rama, Your Excellency, Minister of Education, Your Excellency, Mayor of Durrës, dear representatives of local and central institutions, dear members of the jury, architects, partners, colleagues, students, and friends. There are moments in the lifetime of a university which are not measured by an academic calendar. They are points of no return, and I think that this is one of them. Because today, we will not simply have the winner of a competition, but the vision that will shape a very important part of both our city and higher education in Albania. So today, we will not just hear about an architectural plan, but we will hear about the future, the way a university campus can be transformed into a modern space of innovation, research, and sustainable development. This international competition for the master plan of the university campus is an initiative which Albania has never embarked upon when it comes to Durrës and its transformation. And at this very important juncture, allow me to express my gratitude for the Albanian government and in particular for our Prime Minister, Mr. Edi Rama, for the vision that he and the government has shown about the investments in higher education institutions. I would also like to thank the Ministry of Education for the continuous support, Durrës municipality, as well as the Planning of Territory Agency, the experts of all domains, everybody that has made possible one of the most transforming projects for the future of this city and university. This project clearly bears witness to the fact that sustainable development comes through partnership, dialogue, and a common vision. Durrës was historically a place which was open to exchanges, knowledge, and as of the 14th century, it had the first university in the Western Balkans, and it was an important part of the academic life of the region. But our university, with 17,500 students enrolled, for us, our campus is not simply an ecosystem of buildings, but a space where students create, cooperate, study, research, and prepare themselves for the challenges of the future, a place where the community and us, the academic community, interact with each other. And that is why this project is more than simply a physical investment. It's about investing in human capital, in Albania's youth, and in our capacity to produce innovation and development. And at a time when universities around the world are being transformed at a very high pace, we also have the obligation to think about what kind of university we wish to have in the coming decades. And this is based on the Aleksandër Moisiu University has experienced recently. We now have a strong international profile. We're part of the STARS EU with a lot of academic partnerships and an ever more active role in the higher education domain. Our research newspaper is now indexed, and whilst our engagement in European network is such that it is strengthening our position in the international academic arena. One of the important parts was to make our university's profile one that is international by expanding international networks and having more international students visit and spend time here. So our aim is to consolidate our university as a regional one of international impact and attractive enough for innovators, for academics from around the world. We see the changing of our university also in tandem with what is happening in our city. The future campus should be clearly linked to the local economy, to its businesses, to the tourism sector, to the logistics, technology, services, therefore preparing an ecosystem in which the university not only has professionals that are graduated, but also has a direct impact in the socio-economic development of the city. So, of course, not only it is the city that needs us, but we need the city in return. And we also need to think about infrastructure, and this is why the campus that we are going to have is a necessary step in the right development of our university. It is no coincidence that this event takes place in this modern building, because this is a clear indicator of the fact that academic institutions are being transformed in our country. And of course, this building will then welcome the new students of the 2026-2027 academic year. Our vision is to have a modern campus that is functional, fully operational and integrated with the needs of both the university and the city, along with the future generations. And I am sure that through this project, we will not only build a new campus, but we will bring back a new modern form of this historic city, an identity that links innovation with history, because some of the most successful universities are those that are actually rooted in the past, but clearly visionary about the future. And the fact that this competition has attracted prestigious architectural firms clearly shows the potential of this project for the future of both Durrës and higher education in Albania. I wish to congratulate all of the finalist teams for their professionalism, creativity, vision that they have brought in this process. I'm fully convinced that the winner today will only serve as a milestone for a new chapter of the history of the university in Durrës, a chapter which will create better teaching and learning conditions. It will strengthen innovation, research, it will strengthen our international profile, and it will bring us closer to the community we're rooted in. Because universities are not simply knowledge institutions, but institutions for the future, for posterity. Best of luck, everybody, and thank you for being here today. Ladies and gentlemen, we'd now like to invite for her remarks the Mayor of Durrës, Ms. Emiliana Sacco. Your Excellency, Prime Minister, dear Minister, dear heads of institutions, architects, urban planners, friends who have come from various countries of the world, welcome to Durrës. What a special pleasure it is for me and for us to welcome you to Aleksandër Moisiu University. I feel especially happy that after so many months of intensive work, of coordination and close cooperation, we finally welcome the finalists of this international competition on the Masterplan of the competition, the concept design competition. Durrës University today is one of the most important academic institutions in the country. With over 16,000 students, it has a dynamic community of students, and which year on year it is being expanding not only with young people from all corners of Albania, but also other countries, and they pick Durrës as their destination for higher education. So we must congratulate the vision and the work that those in charge of the university are doing, because in the center of their priorities they have placed international cooperation and, in fact, European cooperation, therefore transforming this university into a complete center of innovative ideas. All graduates from this university and all new professionals are a precious investment for the future of Durrës and Albania at large. We would like our young people to find here not only high-standard institutions, but basically the community where they feel that they can develop their career and realize their aspirations. And this is why we are working on a daily basis, so that future professionals can see Durrës as a city of opportunities where talents are appreciated, where ambitions are appreciated, and where the contribution of each and every one of us becomes values for the future. And therefore, this is very significant, this international concept design competition. It's not simply about architecture or concept design, about the function of a building in this university. It is about a vision which goes beyond building physical spaces. It is an opportunity to create an opportunity for young people to cooperate, to coordinate, to further develop their potential. And that is why this project and all of the finalists have actually thought about our priorities. I mean, both the university and the city, and the needs of our young people. And therefore, it should bring about scope for opportunities, innovation, to strengthen cooperation and build bridges towards the future. I am fully convinced that the ideas that we will see from this competition will help us build not only a dignified campus, but a symbol of faith in knowledge, talent, youth, and the future. I wish to thank all of the architectural firms, the architects, urban planners, and everybody that has been part of this competition, the members of the jury, for their contribution and professionalism. Special thanks to the Prime Minister of Albania for his continued support to university here in Durrës as part of the vision of transforming the urban transformation of our city, and for the vision for universities in the future. Thank you very much, and best of luck, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, we'd now like to invite the Minister of Education, Her Excellency, Madam Mirela Kumbar, for her opening remarks. Thank you.
Good morning, greetings everyone. It is a special moment as it is quite thrilling whenever a project goes beyond itself and its limitations, just like those plants that are rooted somewhere in the ground and actually extend their branches towards the light, moving beyond the roots, seeking new grounds to flourish. And that is actually the idea, or let's say what I was feeling whilst watching the video, and I wish to congratulate those who made such videos. The same applies to the universities. Their roots are grounded in the campuses, and they actually have their own ramifications in the development of a country and culture and economy, and in the way how a society at large chooses to shape its own future. And this is one of the very moments representing what I'm saying. We are not only here to sift through some concept designs on a university campus. We are here to share ideas, to brainstorm approaches on options about how we are going to shape higher education in Albania in the coming decades, how we connect knowledge and the universities, the academia with the city's life. The Aleksandër Moisiu University marked an important milestone of its journey, 20 years of academic life. 2 decades may seem quite few in the history of the university. However, they're enough to lay the foundations of a tradition and to gain the trust of thousands of students going through its classrooms. This university today represents quite an expanded academic world with 5 departments, 17,000 students and hundreds of lecturers and professors, and it actually represents a great ambition to be quite an open and competitive university in the European higher education area. I have commended the faculty of the university even before for the work they have been doing and continue to do towards making this an international university. It is an ongoing work, and we've talked about it with the rector this morning as well. It is the traditional gateway of a historic meeting between Albania and the world, and the university itself found its way of becoming international. I wish to share with you that we are in the process of revising the higher education law. Allow me to underline that when developing the law of 2015, we could not even think about this. The current revised law is going to have an important chapter on taking our universities to make them international. It is a vision for Albania beyond 2030. That is why the new campus cannot be merely viewed as an infrastructural investment, just like a home is not only built on stones and bricks, but on the vision on how it's going to preserve the spiritual and tangible and intangible wealth of its own owners. That applies to universities. It builds on the knowledge, on the communities, and those who strongly believe in the transformative power of knowledge in the society. Well, this is something that has an impact on the way how people communicate with society, how they live, how they shape their future. And whilst we are speaking about the investment in this university, we are talking about an ecosystem that goes beyond walls, that moves beyond laboratory conditions, an ecosystem where education, scientific research, but in particular the human being shall be part of innovation, the entrepreneurship is going to have its own role, and as the students'
Universitetet më të mira
lives
të
shall
botës
be
nuk dallohen vetëm për
a
programet e
path
tyre
for
akademike,
renewal
por
and
edhe për identitetin
blossoming,
e
and also
mjediseve
thriving.
tyre. Dhe Durrësi në fakt
The outstanding and renowned
Aleksandër
academic
Moisiu po e
institutions are
krijon.
not
Edhe
only
në këtë hapësirë të
distinguished
re
by the
ku
quality
jemi,
of
po që
their
ende se
knowledge,
kemi
but also by
inauguruar
the
surprizën e
quality
lëmë
of
për
their
vitin e ardhshëm shkollor.
institutional, the identity they have
Universitetet
in their buildings.
kanë
And this is
veçoritë e tyre
what
dhe
the
krijojnë
university
horizonte.
is
Po,
pursuing.
kur ne projektojmë një kampus,
Universities
nuk
try
premtojmë
to
vetëm
shape new
nevojat e sotme.
horizons,
Kjo
but
është
when we
shumë
build a
rëndësishme,
campus, we do
sepse
not only
shpesh
think of the
gjithë
current
investim
needs, and that is very
Durrës,
important. We
Universitetin
hear
Aleksandër
many
Moisiu.
times
Po,
people
nuk është i vetmi,
saying,
paralel janë shumë
well,
kantiere
this is
në
a huge
arsimin e lartë,
investment, but
qoftë në
only at
Universitetin
the
Politeknik,
university
në qoftë
here,
që ato po
Aleksandër
përgatisin
Moisiu,
për
yes, but not
kampusin
only
e
here.
Universitetit të
We are
Tiranës.
working in
Prandaj, duke parë
other
xhelozinë
sites as well, for
pozitive
Tirana
dhe
University
stimuluese
as well. So looking at this kind of jealousy as quite a stimulating positive drive, we are going to introduce further in the coming weeks the new sites that include Durrës and Tirana, but also Porcha, Shkodra, Elbasan, and Vlora. They are going to be equally parts of an ecosystem that makes a whole. Thank you very much. I'm looking forward
edhe të dëgjojmë
to
konceptet e reja, por do
witnessing
mlejoni
and
që një
listening to the
falënderim
new
në fund
designs
me
that
gjithë
they
zemër
would
të
allow
bëj
me
Agjencisë
finally
Kombëtare
to
të Planifikimit
extend the
Territorit,
heartfelt thanks
drejtorisë
to
së Adelina Greca, që
the
prej muajsh e
agency
muajsh
and
ka
its
nderdhur shumë djerë se
director,
punë për të
Adelina
mbritur në
Greca,
këtë seleksion
who've been
të gjyrave dhe
sweating for
ideve më të bukura.
months to
Shumë
come
mersi
up
për
with
sot.
such a selection of designs and ideas. Thank you, and I wish you success for today. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to wish to invite the Prime Minister Edi Rama to take the floor. It is a special pleasure to have the international competition of the turn take place in the campus of the Durrës University. I wish to sincerely thank all those who are present here and are part of this space of our country's academic life. In particular, I wish to thank the rector for his precious commitment and dedication to this process. Well, this is the next international design competition as part of many such competitions that are part of our ambition for Albania, and that allow new opportunities to arise for changes that transform not only the quality of the lives of those who are the future users of what's to be built, but also it transforms the way how we see ourselves and the future of a community. We are very proud since we are at the university. I see it fit to underline that we have established the largest university of urban development across Europe by bringing together a considerable number of architects and international prestigious studios working together with the local firms and the new architects, young architects of Albania. Well, it is a truly open university as such, as it offers an opportunity to all those dedicated to architecture and urban development in our country to confront their knowledge, to confront their beliefs with the beliefs and knowledge coming by the architects and architectural studios that find themselves front runners of worldwide developments. That gives them an opportunity to grow, professionally speaking, to learn by doing, not simply by being lectured or reading theory, and it is also an opportunity for them to accompany and be present throughout all the creative process, together with international reputable architects and studios. Well, it will not be many years down the road for us to see that this open university, as I call it, will produce side by side these highly outstanding architects, girls and boys who will be part of them coming from this university. We are going to have our own stars rising in the sky of architecture and urban development worldwide. But up until then, I wish to say that we are under the conditions, or we're in a situation where we have kick-started or have the design for a highly ambitious project that is the Durrës University campus. Our development that can include a process that kick-started years back with the opening of this university that at the time it's not that it had a very serious plan to turn this into a university that is not simply a place where students come to get some lectures and then leave. We want to turn this into a 24/7 student hub. This is another outcome of the 2018 students' protest, where we listened attentively to what they were calling for, and we indeed separated everything that was impertinent or not relevant to the future and our own possibilities, and focused on what was pertinent and within our capacities. That brought so many positive novelties for the students, that resulted into much better dormitory conditions, much better conditions at the university, new labs, as well as a larger financial support. We are nonetheless awareness that the process must take another step ahead, and as you will see from the designs you are going to be introduced to, we want to actually steer properly the increasingly sharper issue of sheltering students during their studies. As you know better than I do, that not all students stay in the dormitories, not always or not all the infrastructure can handle all the demands, and there are many students that live on rental space in the cities, either in Tirana or Durrës, which is something that weighs on the budgets of their families and their own. The establishment of a residential area for students instead makes it possible for them to not only benefit from a more reasonable housing, but also to have an opportunity to socialize with one another and have academic development go hand in hand with their social and human development. Whilst I am speaking and whilst the minister was speaking, I was thinking that those at the University of Tirana, well, are maybe feeling a bit bitter, maybe they are not so happy with what they are hearing, as they have been trying since time now to give an impetus and new organization of the Tirana campus. But this campus is not a development that precludes the other one. We're actually in a process of aligning the needs and addressing them between the College of Europe and Tirana University. The College of Europe is being built in Tirana in another spectacular development based on another design coming from Arami and international architects that will create an opportunity for Tirana University to have significant space. I wish to conclude with something relevant to this competition. There are two particular novelties this competition brings about, and they are results, or let's say, are being proposed by the prestigious ETH Zurich-based university. Since Albania has turned into a highly attractive destination for the students, international students and professionals in architecture, so we do not only have ours here, but also students and also professionals who come, conduct visits and want to exchange. The Zurich University students have been doing research in Albania since 1 year. And as I said, there are two novelties applied in this competition. First, the establishment of a students' jury. They are going to work independently, let's say, at the same time, with the international jury, who I wish to thank for having come from abroad to see these proposals, they are going to draft a report with their conclusions. They will have their own selection and will submit them to the main jury prior to the final result. That is a report that will serve as an advisory input in the evaluation process by the jury. A representative of the students is part of the jury. As I see, it is a she, even better. So they will be representing, let's say, there will be a representative in the main jury as a permanent advisor, I would say, or consultant, to bring the perspective of those who are the current users of the campus and have got their way of thinking how the future campus is going to be. The novelty is also the discussion or brainstorming on ideas beyond the size of the campus, because they have been invited to reflect on a connecting area between Durrës and the university, considering it as the same part of the same urban history. So the purpose is to understand better the connection between the campus and the city and try to have a better grasp how the development of both the sides could support each other. Whilst the main and student jury will focus on their evaluation, the final teams are going to participate in an intense workshop with representatives of Durrës municipality, with the Territorial Development Agency, Territorial Planning Agency, and for as long as the architects, the urban planners and citizens work together to identify the key issues of the area and bring ideas on the table on tangible projects that could not only enhance the lives of the inhabitants but also of the students beyond the perimeter or the boundaries of the campus. The workshop will have several topics, that is, public space, access for pedestrians and bikes, the transformation of informal areas through urban planning, and others. At the end of the process, the intention is for each final team to become a patron, and you know, I like being a patron very much, to a patron, or let's say to supervise or have under their own care two free of charge projects, so free of charge two projects. I am very grateful, and I wish to say this for the international architects working in Albania, because what people do not know and do not see is their contribution in so many pro bono projects with no payment in exchange for schools, for other public works, or, meeting other demands that may come as a result of our work. So these one or two projects are going to be developed in cooperation with Durrës city, as well as our partners, the IN Development Fund and other partners, under the supervision, the professional supervision of the Minister of Government, Mr. Demo. By doing so, we do not limit the competition in just proclaiming a winner, but we consider it as a starting point for much more than that. I do not want to take more of your time, but once again I wish to thank the members of the jury joining us in this endeavor. I wish to thank the participating studios, and as we all know, we can't have 5 winners, only 1, but that does not mean that the 4 others are 4 losers, because in the meantime, we are all, and they are all, committed to doing the best as part of an irreversible and transformative process for Albania. Thank you very much. Well, let us start with the 5 design concepts for the master plan of Durrës University. So we are going to invite the 51 and 4E. We are going to follow 2 presentations, 20 minutes of presentation and 10 minutes of Q&A. Let us follow the first proposal.
Tokbuke literally translates as breadland, the Albanian expression for arable fertile land capable of sustaining life. But to understand Tokbuke is also to understand the history of Albania itself. For decades, under the communist regime, land belonged to no individual. Private property was confiscated and collectivized. The land provided for everyone, yet it belonged to no one. Agriculture became both a system of survival and a symbol of control. When the regime collapsed, Albanians rejected not only dictatorship, but everything associated with collectivity. Fields were abandoned, factories destroyed, irrigation systems neglected. People migrated massively toward the cities because rural life had become associated with isolation, hardship, and the denial of individuality. To work the land was no longer seen as freedom, but as the final remnant of a system people desperately wanted to escape. This rupture still shapes the Albanian relationship to land, labor, and even sustainability today. And yet, despite these ruptures, the concept of Tokbuke endured. The land still carries a collective emotional meaning, land that nourishes, land that sustains, land whose value is intrinsic to life itself. This idea is deeply embedded in Albanian language and culture. Even today, when Albanians gather to eat, they rarely say, "Let's have lunch" or "Let's have dinner." Instead, they say, "Hajde ham buk," come eat bread. Bread becomes synonymous with nourishment, community, and care. But what it is of this land today that we are not in a time of scarcity, but of abundance? In this new era where bread prospers and cities grow, we believe this land still has the crucial task of providing for everyone, not only with bread, but with a common good, with a public space whose quality is intrinsic to the very structure of the territory. A resilient development of the northern Durrës lowland begins with recognizing a fundamental truth of the landscape. This territory is shaped by water.
Good morning. My name is Freek Persijn, and I represent the office of 51 and 4E in Brussels. And today we wanted to start with a soundscape, with a text that is written and read, because working on this site, somehow the first thing you see is not the thing that you have to work with. This land is not empty land. Maybe we cannot see much, but if you listen closely, we can hear what it says. And so in our proposal, we start from the fact that this land has a history and that it is our task to see its capacity and to see its potential. So to understand what it is and what it can do. That's why we have assembled this team with an artist, but with two landscape architects. One landscape architect from Holland, one from Albania, because our proposal is in essence about landscape and it's about beauty. And before I start, I would like to thank Gust, Peter and Matteo who are here, who have brought all of this together. And would also like to thank the organization of this amazing competition, also the fact that the students are here. Every time Albania is evolving, every time it becomes more professional and more challenging, but also more exciting. The challenge here in this project is to live with the water, to build on land that was once sea. This land has been reclaimed on the sea, and now that we have inherited it, our responsibility is to reclaim it once more. It looks like barren land, unattractive, but if we look closely, we can also see that where there's water, there can be life. And we believe that the current state of this land should not be its destiny. It is not a given, it's in a way a choice. In this case, the choice not to maintain and the choice not to care. But maybe it's also a bit of a tragedy because maybe it's not really knowing how to care. And this is what we try to invent and propose with our project, to find a way how to deal with the land first and foremost. Because what we see today is somehow land degradation, we see flood risk, we see pollution, and we see the water becoming salty and the land becoming salty. And we think this downward spiral, where the one effect reinforces the other, is really the spiral to break. And we think there are things we can do to create value and to change that dynamic, and to somehow have an upward spiral in this dynamic. One thing we see, and which we see here in Durrës as a unique opportunity, is to not do what has happened on the outskirts of Tirana, where the mobility system is overlapping on the water system. So this has happened spontaneously. Here, this has not fully happened yet. And so here, there's the opportunity to pull these two systems apart. So to really safeguard the channeling system that has been implemented decades ago, and to not suffocate it with the mobility system. So in our proposal, the first step is to keep the channels free and to keep them functional and to somehow build on that work that has been done. The second opportunity we see is that the channels, which are today, let's say, all the same, that you can differentiate them. Here in dark blue are the channels that can evacuate the water and that can somehow drain the land. But in blue, we see an opportunity to change the nature of some of the channels and to use them not to drain the water, but to harvest the water. So here, in the light blue, you see the proposal that some of the land can become a collector. So the light blue channels are collectors. This is somehow a counter-proposal to what has happened in the terrain next to it, where the whole land has been leveled, raised with 1 meter, which is of course a very direct and immediate reaction to how to deal with water. But what it does is that it saves your own plot, but it pushes the problem to the neighbor. And of course you could raise the whole land, but the land is already built. So we think this is a very counterproductive strategy, and also one that doesn't really generate quality. It generates costs, but not really quality. Instead, we propose to the light blue channels to somehow widen them, to take land, to make more space to collect water, and then also to take small dikes. And then in these light blue channels, to accept that sometimes they will flood, and that the water that floods is fresh water, is rainwater. So if you keep it, you can use it, and it becomes a value of the land. Also, if we somehow can make the land, the top part, contain fresh water, we can also push the salty water away, and you somehow separate these problems. So we deal with rainwater, salty water, and polluted water. We think this can be a strategy for a larger area. So here you see the site, and all of this land has not been treated with infrastructure in this way yet. So we imagine this as a system that could continue, that could grow, but that can already be implemented on this site. So this idea of separating can already be implemented. And so this is somehow the image we have, the urban vision, that this place becomes a park, a water park, an inhabited water park. And so basically here you see in the middle the sweet water. And basically what it does is that you turn the land into fertile land again. To do so, we work with microtopography, so widening the channels, harvesting and storing the water so that it doesn't evaporate, and then slowly giving it back over time. So this is the plan of the campus, and this is the central channel, which can become like a central park, and this is the moment that it rains. The moments of rains are excessive. They don't happen a lot, but when they happen, they really flood the land. And the idea is not to get rid of the water as soon as possible, but to keep it and to use it later. And so by cultivating this land again and using the water, quickly you can see in 5 years, in 10 years, that the type of ecosystem that can grow on this land can be really lush and can be really valuable. And so we see this as the core identity of the campus, that somehow a place to learn and a place of interaction is outside, is in the landscape, in this wonderful climate of Albania, and that somehow the whole idea of the campus is how to deal with moments of flood, moments of drought, and of this whole space in between. So the hardscape can become porous. And this is an example of a project in Belgium where we reinstalled on a grass field this type of landscape, and already in a few years you can see that this becomes the identity of the place. So what we propose is the campus as a pioneering settlement to live with agriculture. So this is the key identity of the campus, living in a fertile landscape. And like historical campuses, the garden is the key identity. Unlike old campuses, however, we think that the gardens should not be decoration, but should be productive. So that produce. And we see the campus as a series of cultivated plots. And so we imagine somehow the campus from the outside becoming like an inhabited forest, where the main identity is not the architecture, but the landscape. And so within these landscapes, we can have different identities, we can have different atmospheres, and we can also have flexibility. So a master plan that can already start in a way next month if you start to cultivate a piece of land, and you can start already now. And we've heard that the students have planted trees. This is somehow what we also imagine that would happen with this project. So the core idea of the campus is an environment more than an architecture, where buildings and landscape somehow fuse, where also the existing buildings can be integrated. So let's go through this project step by step. We have imagined different possibilities based on the program, and I will go through them step by step. In the center, you see the channel that I talked about before, and we imagine it somehow as the central park, the central point of orientation. The library we imagine as half garden, half building, where you can really go from inside and outside and study in this in-between. The pool we imagine as a shed, which can open and which can be integrated with the outside. And the sports facilities we imagine as a shelter with an open ground floor as something that can be used for sports during the day, but also for activities to gather at night. And then close to that, there's the orchard and the innovation barn, like a very open, flexible structure, basically a roof, where you can get shades, but you can also interact and use the outside as much as you can use the inside. Also, the existing buildings we integrate in this master plan. So we think also the existing has the capacity to evolve, here with the pavilion in the courtyard, but also on the edges, for instance, this social fire pit, where the edge of the campus becomes also a place to escape and to look out on the landscape and to enjoy the setting sun. We think it's really valuable that the campus integrates so much housing, so that it's a lived-in campus and not a campus where people come at 8 o'clock in the morning and they leave at 5 o'clock in the evening. We think it could be really beautiful to integrate the housing everywhere, and we have tried to make housing which really can be big buildings, but small living units, like groups of people living together, what you see here, living together around a common room.
Sorry interrupting you. Just a kind reminder about the time. 5 minutes remain for the presentation.
Okay, here it says 7, but that's okay. Yeah. The veranda house, where you have this common room as well, where in this common room you can start to organize lunches, dinners, where the staircases are outdoors. And this is another thing that we imagine, that somehow all of the circulation would be outdoors, that there's no elevators, that the buildings are extremely simple, but really extrovert and related to the outside. And here you see this kind of common courtyard opening up to the landscape. So this is the program that you've asked for, and all of this is structured by this one central building, which is something that we call the STEM, which is the infrastructure, which sits on the middle of the plot, as we've shown on the principle before, so that the central infrastructure is not on the channels, but on the center of the plot. And this groups both the mobility, which happens on the first floor. We think electrical cars are really the future for a country which has so much renewable energy. We also think electrical bikes should really be the kind of mode of transportation of the students. So to arrive at the heart of the campus is really an asset. Below there is the promenade. That's somehow a central space which is shaded. Above there is more housing, so people really live in the center of the campus, and this housing is mono-oriented but also cross-ventilated. And just like in the other buildings, it has this principle of also having shared collective space. And also very important, this central infrastructure is a water infrastructure. This is the place where all of the water is, as a principle, gathered, kept, and somehow through the channels that organize the landscape, given back and used for irrigation and for cultivation. And so here you see the setup, the principle of the master plan, and also here you see the kind of proximity that we think is also quality. So the quality that we see in this campus is that the center is very urban, where the ground floor of this open building somehow is the place where people meet, they do the shopping, outsiders can come in, people can have a sense of orientation, and the edges of the campus are still open. They're not infrastructural, they don't have a lot of program, but they're open and they're natural and landscaped. And so in that sense also there, the campus could continue. And so this idea is really an idea of orchestrating the flows of many different people and to generate fruitful encounters. So a student living there in the student housing, taking his morning swim, having his breakfast in the orchard, going after his classes to a lunch of a friend, studying in the library garden, and then party around the party place, social pit. So in this environment, on foot, you have in proximity a lot of different experiences, all structured around the landscape. The delivery, very efficient. Another totally different type of move. The gardener, the farmer, which could somehow maintain a part of the campus in one day. So we imagine a farmer could work for 4 days and have 3 days of rest. The chef, a restaurant in the center of the site, producing with local food. The tennis player coming from the campus next door, using the facilities. And then the swallow, just like the pigeon that is here, somehow crossing the architecture free as a bird. So this is the project we propose. It's structured, but structured to allow freedom. And also a principle that is flexible. So there's a few elements that we have decided. But in a way, the proposal that we have here could also change. So this is the proposal we have invented it with this kind of cluster of public facilities in the middle. But we could also imagine, like you see there, that for instance the sports center moves to the edge, or that the housing is more grouped. We have also in terms of height, there's differences possible. There's also still some empty plots that can be cultivated or developed. But really the key elements of this proposal are a master plan in a few decisions and steps. And I'm almost done. So to summarize, our master plan proposal is we propose to sculpt the soil to harvest the water, to use the water to cultivate the soil in a landscape of plots. We propose to inhabit this landscape with simple, affordable, and low-tech buildings. And we put the infrastructure in the center, leaving the edges open. And then point number 5, with this project we think an example could be set of how to be innovative, how to be ecological and social, but also how to be feasible and affordable, and how to spend your public money well. And all together our proposal shows somehow ingredients that you can start to cook with. So this could be the kind of core of a development that can set an example of how to live with water and how to live with the land, where water and land are given as much space as mobility, infrastructure, and buildings. Thank you very much.
Now the members of the jury are welcome for the questions.
And for the questions, I can also invite the team to come on the stage.
Ciao, thanks for your very beautiful presentation. My question is about the phasing. With what do you think the operation should start? And And should the long building, which I guess it's around 250 meters, something like that, when should that be made? If it has to be made all at once, or what's the schedule, a potential schedule?
Okay. So in our view, what drives the whole operation is not the buildings, but the landscape. So what we think is key is to start structuring and cultivating the landscape. And in that sense, we don't think that this long building is the thing that holds everything together, and is also something that can be built step by step. We didn't go in the presentation into that issue because we think that would be too technical and too precise. But the idea of the long building is more something that you work towards, and that becomes the central spine. And so it's really this notion of the promenade that somehow connects the site from east to west, and this water park that connects the site from south to north. That are the key elements to slowly start building, and the rest is flexible. So you work in steps towards, so you could say the stem and the canal are things that you plan towards, and the other ones are more things that you start to cultivate and be more opportunistic. Maybe also if the program changes, that this can change. So somehow that's the differentiation that we see in the master plan. This cross is somehow really designed and has to follow one principle. The plots are much more free and flexible and can adapt and somehow respond to questions that arise.
So just to add, I think the water basin, because we are building in the water basin is in fact an infrastructure that once you build, you could add on the building. So the water basin, maybe some restaurants, the shed, and then on top of that 2, maybe even 3 layers of housing can be built. This can be segmented in parts or even in heights.
Yeah.
We cannot allow in this field to go with high structures, because then you need really expensive foundation system. Therefore, our buildings are mainly horizontal, and it's quite flexible to add or not to add.
And I think maybe also one thing that makes sense to us is not to start by undoing what is done already. I think it's more smart to start in places where things have not happened yet. And for instance, the street that we see here in between the buildings, that maybe this changes in a later phase. So I think it's a very pragmatic approach.
Thank you. Yeah, perfect. It's a beautiful project. It really reminds me to one of my favorite projects, which is from Aurelio Galfetti in Bellinzona. I don't know if you know it, which is basically an infrastructure that it's also used, inhabited in a way. So I'm really catched by that idea. I have one question though here, because it's very clear in terms of how you get there with the car, and I'm guessing that you are envisioning the parking just in the stem, right? First question is if the parking needs for the whole campus fits in the stem in one level, that it's the cross-section that I saw, and then how it's the experience when you arrive not in a car. You talked about electrical bikes. I love that idea. I guess that this is also connected to a public transportation system that should operate in the whole area. So how do you envision the arrival and the navigation through the campus as a pedestrian, not as a car that arrives to that? So 2 questions.
The public transport stop happens here. So this is the node, the articulation where people that come by public transport come into the campus. And in our idea, you then immediately arrive in the central promenade where this is integrated.
Another thing what we could say is, the vision is that today bikes do not have a place how to reach to the campus, because you only have roads. The master plan we envision will provide in the future interesting ways and soft mobility to go through the whole area. Even the vision here is to link it to Durrës. So this place will be a kind of central park, water park, that links the buildings with the center of Durrës. So all of a sudden, the campus is linked to the center of Durrës through the fields and the agriculture. And this will provide a lot of traffic, hopefully, soft mobility. And of course, the central garage, there is no more fun than to come with the car entering to the center of the site and to be there. But even when there are no cars in the future or less cars, this is to be demolished and can still function as another place or another building. So in that sense, it is flexible in its use.
Yeah, so we imagine somehow this first floor to be like quite a mixed place, like where cars are present, bikes could be present, but it's not like in that sense. It's a place of arrival more than a place for storing cars.
Just to reply to the question, we are envisioning now 20% more of what was asked in terms of parking space, but we envision also the building as a capable structure where what's parking, what's housing is flexible because they take the same dimensions and the same structural distances.
Thank you.
First of all, I would like to congratulate you. It's very impressive work. There was in the brief a lot about the future, you know, how can this university campus be somebody that is open for the future? And let's say the problem with all these briefs is we don't know what is the future. I think in this proposal it's very interesting that it's like a growing university that can also develop to demands that we don't know yet. So in this sense, I think it has exactly this futuristic approach that is also demanded. Another thing which I think is working very well is I visited as a teacher many different universities, and there are many universities where you get lost. It's like an open field. I appreciate a lot the density that you achieve here and also the variety, right? If you are in the western corner, it looks totally different and feels other than the middle axis and so on. I don't really have a question, but maybe I would also like to hear the voice of one of the landscape designers, because this idea is very intriguing, that the water that the whole ecological system is built on is coming from the sky, right? It's the rain. It's not already existing or a river or anything. Are there any references for a similar ecosystem? Is this something that you will kind of introduce, or is this already a model that is elaborated?
So I think for so I represent Yoshile, the local landscape office. The expertise on the water was the Dutch company. She's not present here, but yes, they have an extensive experience in how to deal with seawater that enters the land and how to push it out. Rainwater is one of them. If there is water coming from the mountain, it can also help to push, but mainly it's about the organization on where you hold the water. So it's a lot about trying to harvest it, to keep it on the terrain, to help flip the script of salination and pollution, and to regenerate the soil. And then the landscape itself, what we do with planting reeds in the wet brocklands, help to regenerate the soil. The vegetation dies, provides nutrition for the next generation of vegetation, and etc. So.
Because I see the time. I think there is a 3-page explanation in the booklet. HNS is a Dutch company, and of course Holland is the sea, which is reclaimed, land reclaimed from the sea, there is a lot of problems with salination. So it's that technology that is often used that we also will use here.
Can I say something more? And one aspect we think is, sorry, I have a microphone. One thing that we think is could be very powerful is that, like in the painting of Etihila, where you see people planting trees, that actually to do this with students, to start planting the soil and to really do this very hands-on, could also build a totally new relationship between the students and this place, that they are not just consumers that start to somehow receive services from, but they really build their campus as well. And I think we have very good experience of doing this type of work. And I think the kind of motivation and the immediacy of occupying this place is very powerful and really somehow also is an opportunity to build a community together.
Can I add the question? Thank you for your... Thank you for your presentation and for the ideas that you are bringing. My questions are about quantity. You are quantity.
Quantity, yeah.
Quantity. Well, first because you are giving us an idea that I read as a very interesting cross between a modernistic, pragmatic utopia of layering functions with agricultural, philosophical utopia, which is quite nice. But you are proposing that landscape is the protagonist. So there is a quantity implication in terms of the relation between the built surface and the other surface. The risk is that the fields that you are leaving for the operation of productive landscape become symbolic and reduced to representations of productive fields and not real productive fields. So what is the ratio limit? This has also an implication about water, because the water that you are harvesting is the water from the roof of the buildings. And as in Holland, it rains 3 times more than it rains in the Durrës. There is a quantity implicated on this. So you need surface to harvest water, but you need also surface to promote the protagonism of landscape. What is the relation and what is the strategy?
Do you want to respond or shall I start to respond? This is indeed true, that there is a balance between the unbuilt land and the built land. And what we also saw is, like, the plot itself is imagined as a very dense place, and there's not yet an imagination of what will happen around it. So in that sense, in the model that we have proposed, we have reduced a bit the amount of housing. This you could raise up to the amount that is asked for by just adding 1 floor. But for us, somehow the balance that we have in the model was a balance that feels right. And we think this is a kind of negotiation to be done and a fine-tuning to be made. And yeah, we think if you look at this whole area and what the settlements provides, it's really about what does the plot next to it do? Does it become part of it? Also the way how the whole infrastructure is handled and how you connect this plot to... So there's many open questions in how this campus as a building becomes an environment. And the one that you raise is indeed a very important one, that this balance needs to be kept. So in terms of square meters, it is possible to add more. But we feel in terms of balance between unbuilt and built space that it's better to not overdo it.
So the problem is that we cannot build very high in this area. So we have to stay low. So you have to negotiate with the open space constantly. Where we don't meet the program is in the housing. So I think there was requested around 3,500 to 4,000 students. In the model you see, there are only 3,000 students with an average of 10 square meters per student. So either you densify that, then you touch the quality of the student housing, either you increase the buildings. The central one you can increase with 1 layer, This is not a problem. Still, and then you will meet the conditions. But I think I'm very happy with your question, because this is not only for this spot, but for the whole area, something to take care of. The balance between open and build.
So yeah, we also talked a lot about the feasibility of the agricultural part. And I think that you don't have to imagine agriculture as grain production or large-scale production. So we are thinking more to gradually go to orchards, which are low maintenance. Start with Tama-X plants that are salt-resistant, and then do top crop, regenerating the soil, and then going towards orchards that can work very well with restaurants or agritourism, or just a kind of maybe relaxing moments, etc. So it's not large-scale agriculture.
Any more questions?
Thank you for your presentation. I really think it's a very interesting approach to a campus today. Doing this kind of decentralized structure where you have a stem, but at the same time open borders, let's say, like it's very fluid to the outside, and at the same time having a linear center, so to speak, which is a contradiction in a way. What is maybe for a person used to a campus structure surprising at the first moment is, how do you meet? How do you feel like this is where you naturally gravitate? Where is the point of recognizing the identity of that place and the natural meeting point, so to speak, when you make an appointment, when you say, let's meet at the university, at the campus? How do you structure the public space hierarchically in that kind of longitudinal extension that has no beginning or end, that is really a climax or anything? I think this is an interesting general question when you do these kind of...
I don't know where this device is. You took it back, I think. Yeah. Thank you. Maybe you should do it now. The way how we use this is that here for us, it's more so on this long line, there's moments of of difference. Here it's more like the learning, teaching center. Here it's really this open space. And here with the library garden, the sports and the innovation barn, it's almost more the places of encounter. And so this long line is almost like an orientation device where you can find different qualities in relation to what is next to it. So it's this street almost that somehow cuts through different atmospheres. And so you have this place so in a way it's not very difficult to orient. And so somehow the identity of the campus is made in the combination of this long line, which is always the same, and the things that are put next to it and surround it. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I mean, you don't have squares. You have a street, so it's a long street, and
yeah,
then it crosses different atmospheres, as you say. But what?
Yeah, you have a big canopy, like a stoa. And in that stoa is a place where you always meet, where you bump into each other, because you always pass there to go from one side to another one. So you meet a lot of people, because you always go centrally. And that area is then identified because it crosses sometimes open space, sometimes closed space, but every space in the campus has this stoa, has a relation to this center.
And so here, you could say, here it's in a way a bit more an enclosed gathering spot. Here you are in relation to this open landscape. And here it's really this space in between the library, the sports, and the innovation that has a different mood.
So they're characterized by very different spatial identities, basically, along the linear development. Yeah. So you avoid the mega structural trap, so to speak, by being identified locally.
Yeah, so there's a multiplicity of places. Yeah. So also the people, like we try to show with the students, that if you live on this campus, you don't live around one square, or you don't live around one identity, but you somehow have different identities, so it's like a small neighborhood.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Zonja dhe zotrinj, vjoj me paraqitjen e dytë të projekt propozimeve për konceptimin e masterplanit të Kampusit Universitar Aleksandër Moisiu, Durrës. Ftojmë në skenë skuadrën e kryesuar nga studio Bjarke Ingels Group. Do të ndjekim fillimisht 20 minuta prezantim dhe më pas 10 minuta pyetje përgjigje me jurinë ndërkombëtare. Ndjekim projekt propozimin e dytë.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be back here in Durrës. I have to say that previously we've been obviously much more engaged with your sort of iconic coastline. We even tried to imagine what a urban integrated football stadium could look like in Durrës. But of course, coming back now with the possibility to try to reimagine what is going to be the role and character of your future educational campus is a challenge that is incredibly relevant in the world today, not least in the light of artificial intelligence. Obviously, Durrës, the kind of presence of the capital region on the waterfront, founded by the Greeks, expanded by the Romans, and finally sort of expanded again by the Italians in this kind of rationalist expansion. Our area is really the part that we didn't know so well before, and that has not yet really acquired the character and identity that is striking for Durrës, with the port, the beaches, and the sort of hilly waterfront. And we really believe that the campus has the potential to create a kind of social and cultural condensation that could actually help transform this kind of rationalist expansion into a new and vital part of Durrës. You can say right now the kind of vast openness, the somewhat scattered architectural orchestration within the rectangular framework, the exposure to the heat, the exposure to floods, represents a challenge that we could actually turn into a potential. So somehow to really work with the water, allow it to orchestrate the public realm, and try to bring in evaporative cooling and shade and comfort, almost like a civic oasis in the middle of kind of rationalist periphery. And in many ways, this kind of coming together of different worlds is also the namesake of the University, Aleksandër Moisiu, somehow brought together Albania and European culture. And if you can say, if intelligence in the sort of classic measure is almost becoming a commodity with the advent of artificial intelligence, increasingly your ability, like what is the role of a university? It's not just to sit on your laptop and learn, it's actually to learn how to engage and interact and animate and organize with each other. And in many ways, you can say some of the hard facilities on the inside, what happens in the classroom, it is at least as important what happens between the buildings, underneath the shade, in the public realm. And in some way, one ambition could be that you could say if you have empathy and processing power, the Alexander quotient could be the ability to navigate successfully between the two, because I think the entrepreneurs of the future will really be those who understand to navigate both worlds successfully. And in that sense, we sort of imagined that this kind of idea of the portico, the transition between the inside and the outside, could really be not just a response to the Mediterranean climate and the culture Durrës and Albania, but really also a place to maximize the engagement between the different students. So in that sense, the kind of porosity and the invitation, the shade is really the core of our proposal. And of course, relationship to nature, biophilia. Darwin famously took long walks in nature when he did his thinking. Aristotle had this peripatetic school where they would walk around in the canopies and discuss that physical movement was a major part of the learning experience and the thinking experience, and maybe we could take that dimension to the third dimension. So the existing campus with the buildings that have already been put down, and we imagine maybe a kind of general gradient from academic through kind of shared resources to the places where people live. A series of forested parks and wetlands that connect the different zones, a kind of very classic urban integration into the surrounding master plan, and then sort of surgically placing the new construction and even some new shading structures to tie it all together to become sort of a real neighborhood well connected to the surroundings. And within this, to break down the scale and break down the rigidity of the rational grid, almost consistently introducing the diagonal that also provides better shade vis-a-vis east and west and allows for the prevailing winds to pass through the campus. We end up with this kind of canvas of an urban plan that somehow tries to bring this sort of possibility of the encounter. So here you start seeing these shaded spaces, a combination of vegetation and architecture that somehow allows all of the buildings to have a great degree of invitation and accommodation, not just inside, but also in and around them. So first of all, this idea of moving through the campus, we imagine to use the support functions to raise the center of the campus above the prevailing flood levels. So it somehow adds a little bit of a place-making topography to an otherwise completely flat site. So essentially bridging from the surrounding city up to the main sort of gardens of the campus, where the surroundings, you have this more exposed openness already as the buildings touch the surrounding neighborhood. The porticos provide shade and invitation, and as you then move in, you find yourself in increasingly lush and enjoyable outdoor spaces that on a day like this will really provide a great invitation for people to linger and spend time. So you can see almost like using the new building to complete the city block, and then all of the sort of support functions and necessities underneath the ground. And then on the level above, this kind of open green space that unites the entire campus. If you look at a kind of Nolly map, you can see that all along the perimeter, the buildings have this expansion of the public realm, the invitation that provides shade, and even the kind of main library has this kind of journey through it. So you have a series of alleyways that actually makes the seemingly formal block very sort of inviting and engaging. And you also see as soon as you create a little bit of density, shade from the buildings, and then in addition shade from the landscape will make the public realm much more engaging and enjoyable. So you can see throughout this kind of buffer zone, which is a classic Mediterranean invention, somehow becomes the invitation to linger and explore and give in to curiosity. Then the nature aspect, of course, we have the climate, the need to orchestrate the water, the desire to provide shade with vegetation, to diversify the public realm, and to create this kind of material and ecological identity. So on one hand, all the softscapes are really geared towards the successful orchestration and management of water, and the hardscapes serve for more sort of programmatic activities, but that also serve as some of the main social spaces for sports or communing. So if you have the sort of overall master plan, a series of sports facilities that relate to the sports hall and the sports fields that also can provide water retention. All the water that falls on the site is steered in these open gutters, like miniature canals, and can be stored at the Alexander Square in the form of a water element before they can be guided into the canal system. And then you have this kind of gradient from forest towards more sort of urban plaza, from where people live to where most of the academic activities occur. And you see that in the programming as well, almost like the residential neighborhood of the student body with a hotel program, kind of academic facilities, and then this kind of mixing chamber where all of the different elements come together. We're also working with father and son Krisiko on the integration of an art master plan that would somehow strengthen these elements of nature and exchange. So in a way, when you go through the public realm, from one side to the next, you have this Alexander sort of arena, like an outdoor amphitheater with the water retention. Then you get into the kind of learning gardens. You continue into the kind of more forested student commons around the main library. And finally, an actual forest on the other side. Inside the student residences, we somehow continue the forest. The sports gardens, hard-paved areas with program that can also serve as water retention. Productive orchards around the existing academic buildings that can really be actual for growing mostly fruit trees of various kinds. And then finally, the alleyways and entrances that always have smaller trees and canopies to provide this kind of this entrance. Here you can see some of the productive gardens in the forest. Here you have a typical alleyway where the level change, the shade, and the trees somehow make it a place where you would like to linger and enjoy. Finally, for the sort of economic viability, of course, the student residences pay for themselves. We imagine a hotel component could actually help activate the campus in the kind of off-season during the summer, and could help actually program the innovation hub, the conference facilities, also the sports arena for other events, so that we could imagine that sort of extending the academic season to include the holiday seasons. It could also be a driver for a successful operations of the university. And then finally, when we look at the kind of architectural intervention, this kind of inclusion of porticos permeates the entire project. So you have the existing buildings where we imagine sort of almost like a new arrival to create sort of a freestanding portico that then becomes increasingly integrated in the architecture of the new buildings. So here, almost as a new space-defining element, like getting dropped off today, you can definitely see how the absence of shade makes you almost run for cover, at least if you are Northern European. So essentially, this could really be a way to create this kind of informality and invitation when you arrive, a space that is purely shade for students to gather, meet. Then, of course, you have in between the buildings, the rectorate and the multifunction building. Again, rational square buildings with this kind of 45-degree rotation from the landscape existing in the plan, and permeable in such a way that you can actually move all the way through the buildings in this kind of series of alleyways. You have the large auditoria and sort of public functions, various kinds of smaller meeting rooms. You have the rectorate offices on the top, and here the innovation hub. So a kind of very rational plan, but where the permeability really opens it in all directions. And then sort of from the outside, you can see this this gentle expansion of the rectangle. Once you get inside, you can see this is one of these alleyways that actually cuts through all of the buildings. And here you have the kind of courtyard typology that has been sort of elevated, so columns become planters, provide natural shade in this kind of conditioned space on the inside. And of course, on the upper levels, you look out over this courtyard with a kind of agora beneath and the kind of more quiet functions above.
A kind reminder about the time, 5 minutes remain.
Yes. And then you have the sports building adjacent to it. In this case, the kind of arcade. There's a little acceleration. In this case, the arcade works together with the general section of the sports hall. As you kind of pass through the building, you look into some of the supporting functions. In this case, the swimming pool becomes the vault, becomes the underside of the bleachers for the sports hall, and in such a way, the rational organization of the inside starts blending together with this kind of delineation of the public realm on the outside. The student residences, these kind of two perimeter blocks, like rational courtyards. Here we've tried to make something that is very straightforward and rational. You can again see how the portico is always integrated with the section. Jesus. So essentially like an incredibly rational floor plan that allows for a great variation of smaller and bigger units. I think there's something funny with the clicker. Let's see. Maybe I stay over here. And that brings us sort of to the last element of the campus, which we think could be the sort of embodiment of this kind of notion of bringing together hard and soft, inside and outside. So essentially the library, which is where you can say the human experience and knowledge combines. On the outside, it's essentially a series of very rational floor plates, but where the kind of arches, in this case, almost become an invitation as it bounces from one level to the next. Inside, you have this kind of core of information, spaces for students on one side and researchers on the other, that simply rotate from one level to the next. The public space passes through the ground floor, as you could see in the kind of Nolly plan. You have the exhibition space, a little museum on one side, and the library on the other. And Jesus. Then as you go up, each perfectly rational plan simply rotates 60 degrees, allowing this kind of continuity of space, double height space, so that somehow the kind of segregation or this kind of tower of knowledge is broken down with a series of incredibly inviting public spaces, a kind of very rational floor plan where you always have the supports in the intersections, but that ends up creating this kind of effortless invitation. Here's the passage through the building, the museum and exhibition on one side. And again, as you pass through, you enter into the kind of the public space of knowledge at the heart of it, where you have all the sort of archives of books, research facilities, and then of course you have the kind of more contemplative spaces for research and study, overlooking the campus and this kind of periphery of Durrës. So in many ways, the architecture becomes almost like a symbol of this kind of idea of the interaction between the hard and the soft in intelligence and empathy between like technology and the kind of social dimension. So in some way you can say that if the idea of the kind of innovation of the campus and the orchestration is really to merge the inside and the outside, the hard and the soft, the focused and the formal, the personal and the communal, then the library ends up sort of almost like embodying that dimension in a kind of vertical expansion of the social dimension. Jesus. Maybe just try to play slide number 122. So, so I think, sort of to boil it down, we think the kind of rationalist heritage that this part of Durrës contains seems to have never really achieved its full identity. The kind of rationalist grid is there, but it has somehow remained empty, and as a result, you have a public realm that is incredibly exposed and to some extent empty. And by actually bringing some of those rationalist elements, also from a kind of Mediterranean typology, by having what's inside and what's outside united by an in-between space, you end up creating this kind of mixing chamber or an exchange where the soft and social skills of kind of empathy and connectivity can be combined with the hard skills of knowledge and discipline.
Just tell the time it's expired.
I rest my case. Maybe the team could join me here on stage for the questions.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Now the members of the jury are welcome for the questions. Any question?
If I can start. Two things puzzled me. Thank you for your fantastic presentation, like always. What puzzled me was the topographic movement, because you are raising the soil in that library spot. And how does this links with water management? Because by doing that, you are sending water away for the surrounding places, eliminating the potential of that surface to hold water itself. So what is the strategy and how does it work? First question, do you want me to do them one?
Maybe I answered quickly. I mean, it's both like somehow the flatness of the entire region seems to also represent certain challenges right now. So the idea of actually using the necessities of the back of house actually allows us for like a very good internal operations, but that actually also provides, we believe, a certain quality. It creates a sense of place in a place that is otherwise kind of vast and endless. But it also allows for the kind of orchestration of the seasonal floods into something that can actually be a quality and useful for the landscape. So we believe that a tiny bit of topography actually contributes quite substantially to the placemaking and the performance and the operations.
No, indeed, but the question is, it increases the problems of water management on flooding on the surrounding of that topographic elevation, does it?
I mean, yep.
It's a strategy. We're helping to channel the water. So by raising it, it gives us enough topography to play with in order to direct it to where we actually want the water to go.
You have canals around the site as well.
And where do you want it to go?
I'm sorry?
And where do you want it to go?
Oh, the hexagon here.
But it has a huge deposit under?
We have different
You can try to
areas.
play with
one of them is the hexagon,
clicker from
another
hell.
one is the sports field, slightly to the side, which are actually indented. You can see in the model that they are created as retention ponds. And then finally, we also have a purification, a chamber in the plinth that holds the water, purifies it, and then uses it for irrigation.
But you have big deposits under it. And
so I think the strategy is actually bifold. So we are having water exposed to the hair over this side of the slope. So when the water gets into the channels and goes down, and it's here, and it's on the sports field over there, that can overflow. But then also we collect over the other side of the plot, and we store the water. And that's actually what the plinth allows us to do without excavating. So we thought raising the ground level was a good strategy to avoid excavation and basements that are something we wanted to avoid for the same reason that maybe we're discussing now.
okay. My other question is about the relation between the height and the depth of your portico that, at least through your images, look not very efficient in terms of shadow producing. Is it an environmental thing in terms of shadow, or is it part of an atmospheric element, more like decoration?
It varies. I think in general it always provides shade for the immediate hinterlying facade. But then of course, as the kind of main courtyard level is a level higher, in certain cases it actually increases. So in some of the peripheral sections, it feels rather sort of intimate, and in certain cases it feels more sort of a stretched, but the overall orientation of the plot, of course, also means that you have the narrowness of the alleys, and then where we have more solar exposure, the canopy tends to be lower, and in certain places where you have more openness, for instance, like the library as well is surrounded by the forest around it, so there it doesn't really serve as a shading function, but more as an invitation.
Thanks a lot for the project. I think it's very beautiful, the proposal to think of a facade as a space and not just as an end of a building, and not just use it for shadow, but also for social activity. And I think it's very intriguing that you increase the density of this porosity with the program, right? In the student housing, just on the ground floor, there's a very conventional arcade, and then the culmination point is the library, where you have enormous exterior spaces. So I guess this is also with the intention to have more and less social activity in different areas of this campus.
Yeah, it's almost like a dial where you can dial up the volume of social, cultural energy, and you can dial it down again. That's why, like in some way, a major chapter in Albanian history is, of course, the rationalist sort of impact of the Italians. And here we have a kind of rationalist urban expansion, but without any of the architectural elements that were quite successful in the kind of rationalist movement. So in that sense, and of course, the campus has already been started. So the idea was to somehow find a unifying character, like you're saying, the inhabited facade, and you can dial it down to very little, like you're saying in the student residences. It's really just the ground floor, and everything else is just where people live. So you tone down the energy, and then in the more key buildings, it becomes more expansive, more inviting, and more three-dimensional, more spatial.
it is a very, very composed, very finished thing, which of course gives the campus a lot of identity and quality. But how would you envision a possible expansion in case that would be necessary?
I mean, I think we've tried. I mean, this is a relatively, it's a single block, right? So we've tried to somehow unfold this idea of the portico as an inhabited facade element in various ways. I think this idea, as you expand, maybe that is the DNA, that all the buildings have a certain accommodation and invitation around them, that rather than being hermetic artifacts or objects, they are more like porous conditions, and that could probably be articulated in any variety of ways. The three existing buildings, we propose to maintain them here as they are. So in that sense, it will already have a kind of urban variation from the get-go, and I could imagine future expansions. You might take into account this idea of the shade and the coming together of hard and soft, inside, outside, social and computational. But apart from that, the specific architecture of that buffer zone could express itself in many ways, I could imagine.
Thank you for the beautiful presentation and the work. Yeah, I have a couple of questions because I see really beautiful architectural moments in what you are explaining in terms of the library, in terms of the portico spaces, this blurring between the interior and exterior. I really appreciate that. But I understand this as an island of knowledge, let's say, like a classical university campus. I'm thinking about the American campus that are the ones that I know well, even with the quad structure, with the diagonals, beautiful, but that operate as a very autonomous cell, let's say, thinking about the rest of the city. Even in the program zoning that you're proposing, the residential, the sports court, the library, how do you intend to promote interchange with non-university community, with the city of Durrës, with the innovation hub? How do you promote these type of interchanges?
Yeah, maybe you, yeah.
First of all, it is actually imagined as something that is quite porous. You can see that not only are the porticos a soft edge, but you also have entrances that allow you to freely access the social spaces within. And at the same time, we also do imagine that, I think Bjarke went into it for a bit, that each of the buildings can operate independently, generate their own revenue in a way that also carries themselves so that it's not just a university campus. We have the sports arena that can serve for the entire area, similar for the kind of multifunction hall that can operate for as a kind of conference center, the biggest in the area. There's the innovation hub, and then of course the dorms, which are empty in the summer, and as Bjarke said, we proposed a kind of small hotel program, basically a seat for an operator that can then manage kind of overcapacity of the rooms and then offer it to the city, to people surrounding, and at the same time also help to program the rest of these shared programs. So it really is meant as a way to like in terms of physical architecture, it is a welcoming gesture. In terms of social and kind of commercial, kind of infrastructure for the city, it's also meant to be an offering. And then
maybe just one last thing also, because like I think in this kind of rationalist grid, what makes a grid, what makes a generic grid successful sometimes urbanistically? I don't think it has become successful in this part of Durrës yet. But I think the potential is to insert these little pockets of let's say, almost like autonomous identity or exceptions. And I think in that sense, this could be like a Bryant Park or a Lincoln Center, or like the fact that you have these little inserts, because I do think what this part of Durrës is lacking is a real reason to go somewhere. And I think through the program that Kat talked about, it is programmatically open and engaged to the public. It is physically connected to the public, but the fact that it actually has a kind of destination character, I think is actually something that this kind of generic grid plan could really benefit from.
I'm also interested in the landscape design, right? If you say the building is not the object anymore, but it's much more something to be revealed from close by, because you can enter and walk around the facade, then you can cover all the, let's say, large views with trees, and it looks extremely dense. And also the trees seem to be the element that expands to the existing buildings, right? And is covering them somehow, which is also a kind of dealing, with the existing structure. Could you tell us a bit more about the landscape, the density of the trees, how we can imagine them?
Yeah.
Yes, so I'm here representing the landscape team for this. But even if we go back actually to the plan, I think it's showing quite well how we are creating different experiences. But somehow you have also talking about how somehow the central spine, the center of these green main elements are super inviting in the sense that we are creating this plaza where the canopies, the trees are the main sculptural elements. They are kind of almost extending this idea of the portico, so they're green columns somehow. They create this space that it could be used for events or bigger gatherings, but it still has enough shade, and becomes this kind of grand entrance that then goes to something that is a bit more programmatic and kind of relates well to the library. So we're creating this, let's say, outdoor rooms. So in this case, for example, the trees are used almost as if they become the perimeter of it. So these green facades almost creating a center inside where it could be programmed, where people can gather, picnic, study. But then you create a clear edge, a shading kind of element where you can actually sit in the shade with like super wide canopies, for example, with stone pines, or trees actually allowed for people to sit in there, and also having, for example, a lot of green lawns, but also, for example, in the last part, something that is less manicured, so it's with bushes, grasses, something that is a bit more biodiverse, creates different elements that also help a lot in terms of microclimate, because already being on lawn, for example, you're having 2 degrees less under a tree, right? Well, if you go even in this other space where maybe it's a bit more like smaller gathering, it's more about nature, it's more about being in the shade, it's more about being next to maybe some water or reading a book or something like that. That's where you can also read clearly how the vegetation starts being a bit more clustered, a bit more organic in the way it's placed. It becomes this cluster of trees that are taller and then understories. You create small communities of vegetation and trees that somehow help in, again, strengthening the microclimate strategy and creating something completely different. So somehow the trees and the way they're placed as well are creating different identities, and they're somehow used in different ways and kind of structuring the space and the program around it.
And maybe just a short, because I think you were maybe also talking in a kind of conceptual way that, because I mean, of course, from the kind of master plan point of view, it looks like a kind of very traditional kind of formal campus garden. So the idea is like, in a strange way, the overall 45-degree rotation of almost everything somehow creates this, you see it in the facades, etc. But within this kind of somewhat formal geometry, the idea is that the actual vegetation and the choice of plants can have a much more indigenous kind of natural kind of character, so that this idea of the artificial and the natural artificial intelligence, natural intelligence, artificial geometry, and natural sort of forms, somehow is also living in the, so when you see the images, it's much more native plants in a kind of informal organization, even if the geometries are more hard.
Any more questions? Thank you very much.
Zonja dhe zotrinj, ju falenderojmë për vëmendjen dhe ju ftojmë të dalim jashtë për një pushim të shkurtër 15 minuta tek holli i madh. Faleminderit.